one big pharma company could do a full sweep and grab 5 companies. We don't know. And pull them all in, and people could sell out because
I predict that's what's going to happen, Beth, and I think it's going to be in the fourth quarter, especially with this card. To me, this is a resetting of the market, which is really exemplified by the graphs that we've been looking at on these psychedelic stock exchange. You can see it very.
Welcome to another edition of Psychedelic Sages, where we provide intuitive insights, truth bust, and service watchdogs and guides for topics around spiritual medicines, more commonly referred to as psychedelics.
Welcome everyone to another edition of Psychedelic Sages. I'm Beth Bell.
I'm Stephanie Salt.
And today we're going to review the overall stock market of psychedelic stocks. There's been a lot of volatility. We were up at a very, very high point. Everyone was investing. Granted, the stock market has crashed and gone down significantly. We've seen that reflected in the psychedelic stocks as well, but we've also now seen a little bit of an uptick in psychedelic stocks. And so we're not going to look probably at any specific companies today, but we're going to take a look at what the cards have to say about the market in general and what's happening. And I think in future episodes, we'll look at who's actually going to make this and who's going to fall out of the race and potentially who's going to merge. So Steph, let's dive right in, and I'm anxious to see what the cards have to say in regards to the psychedelic stock market as a whole.
Okay. Well, the tarot is really good at giving an energetic snapshot of all the frequencies and vibrations around whatever we're asking for. It's a wonderful tool. That's what I really like it. We say it's random, but what is actually random? So I'm just gonna randomly pick a card and ask, what is the status of the psychedelic market? And just see what we come up with. I don't know. You tell me, is this a good card?
Yeah.
Wow. The Four of Swords. Okay. This is interesting because if we look at the graphs of the stock market right now, it is in recovery compared to where it was 4 months ago. If you look at around May or so, the market was really kind of on the higher end than it is now, and then it did a huge dip. Yeah. So I think this is really apropos that the universe is showing us that it's basically in rest mode and recovery. That's what this is. I think this is kind of like legislation dangling in the air because we really haven't come the full cycle to take advantage of the regulations that are necessary in order to make these substances what we would call legal.
Yeah.
So I still think that regulatory is a huge legal regulatory, and this is causing the market to readjust, I believe. And the companies to really have to go on their worth.
Yeah,
that's kind of and I think what we're seeing is a course correction, because from what I remember, Beth, some of these shares were really selling at a very high price and probably overvalued to a great extent.
Yeah.
I think we were mostly buying hype and hope.
Yes.
Around this time last year. And we were thinking, I hope the price goes on, because the companies really didn't have the asset value wasn't there. I don't think they really certainly didn't have the regulatory backing with the FDA wasn't there. So they were kind of treading water. And I think this card is kind of like treading water, hoping and praying. Look at this. This is the knight laying there kind of like, okay. But I really do believe the market will come back up between now and September. I have that feeling. It's starting to show a little progress on the upward spiral, but I think this is the time to regroup. Yeah. There will be a lot of mergers and acquisitions, joining of intellectual property assets, those type of things, technology, all those kinds of things. I think we're going to see a merger and acquisition frenzy between now and December.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of interesting points there. I think what's going to be really interesting is how the phase 3 trial data from maps is going to impact who invests in which companies. Like, who do people go back into? Because obviously a lot of money's been pulled out. In some cases, there's companies who have probably blown a lot of their money, and are going to need more money, because phase 3 trials are not cheap. Like, any phase trial is not cheap, but phase 3 especially, it's very expensive. So I'm going to be interested to see how that phase 3 data, which has been completed, is going to be received by the FDA. I haven't seen of any particular communications at this point. Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see what that does to the marketplace as a whole, and where that pushes people to put their money.
Yeah, there has been some financial shenanigans, I think, going on with the company's use of funds.
Yeah.
But I think right now we've got this regulatory, the regulatory race, which substance is going to be approved by the FDA first? Will it be DMT? Will it be psilocybin? That's the real question. And I think once that happens, when the first one happens, the rest of them, you're going to see the stocks. I think they're going to absolutely follow and ascend and rise in price.
We know which one has the potential to get approved first. It's the only one that has a phase 3 trial. So there's not really a question mark of which molecule is going to get approved first. It's what kind of precedent is that molecule going to set for all of the others, so that will give less hope and more data in regards to how the FDA is looking at these different molecules and the labeling that they give behind it. So that'll set the precedent. I think it's pretty clear who's going first, because we know who's got the clinical trials and what phase they are in. And so that's really going to start setting those precedents. So I hear what you're saying about the regulatory authorities and that kind of still lurking, the three swords over the top. Does it give any indication, in your opinion, as a sort of a positive spin, a less than positive spin, or a negative spin? Like, are we getting any sensitivities around like the FDA in general? Because this is a really big thing to have potentially a psychedelic agent approved by the FDA. Especially in light of some of the other things that are going on politically with, abortion being overturned and are now happening, and it's changing a bit of the dynamic, which it may make regulatory bodies actually sway towards the more liberal side, because they've made so many conservative statements. Maybe they want to have more balance, and maybe letting this come through is going to happen because of some of the conservative things. Or maybe we're just on a roll for further conservative things. I don't know, and it would be interesting to know a little bit more crystal ball of what's happening at the regulatory authorities when it comes to miraculous agents that can really help with breaking through not only depression, anxiety, PTSD, but like breaking through the veil of the entire matrix of what we believe to be true in this third dimensional realm.
But I do believe that there's other factors going on. Yeah. I know there's got to be some lobbying and some sort of issues with the pharmaceutical companies, to be quite honest. How is this going to affect their market with the current products that they have? So this lull, and this is a great card to show the lull, the kind of arresting for the market to readjust when these things do hit, and who's going to lose money?
No, I think you're definitely on it there. I think the big pharma are trying to figure out how they can, probably in some cases, how they can stop it. But I also feel like the momentum now has broken through to the point where they can't necessarily stop it. They can make it more difficult. They can make the labeling more difficult, more constrained. But I actually feel that big pharma is looking at who they can buy out and who they can take as a merger, so that they can get in on this space early on without having to do all of this upfront work that a lot of these companies have done. So I think that's really part of the sweet spot as well, is there could be an easy buyout coming down the pike. One big pharma company could do a full sweep and grab 5 companies. We don't know. And pull them all in, and people could sell out because I
predict that's what's going to happen, Beth, and I think it's going to be in the fourth quarter, especially with this card. it's to me, this is a resetting of the market, which is really exemplified by the graphs that we've been at on these psychedelic stock exchange. You can see it very plainly. So I think this is exactly what's happening. Big pharma, I think you're going to see some of the biggest pharmaceutical deals by the end of this year. Lots of mergers, acquisitions, buyouts. You're going to see it huge. And it's going to really change the landscape. But they're going to be pumping lots of funds into those companies as well. Yeah, but seasonally, fourth quarter, I feel like between the third and fourth quarters, you're going to see some major shifting. You're already seeing it now, but it's interesting. I think it's a great time, and I'm going to say this, to buy some of these shares. And they're at extremely low prices considering where they were last year. And I'm certainly going to be buying this at this particular time.
Yeah, I wish I'm not an expert on the stock market. I wish we had an expert that was, and I wish we had an expert that is really, really keenly aware of some of these more penny stock companies, these startup companies, and what the strategy is for a buyout. Does a company want to get their share price low? I wouldn't think so. I think they want their share price as high as possible to be more enticing to a big pharma company so they can get a better buyout, right? The value of their shares to be greater. So it is interesting to see a lot of these dipping down. You'd think that the CEOs would want to be really bolstering their share price. And as we saw several months ago now, it's sort of an old story, but I just want to bring it forward about MindMed, when J.R. Ron stepped down and how many shares were sold out of that organization. And that really took them into a deeper dive down. So I'm just curious, if we could get into the minds of these CEOs and understand what they're trying to do and jostling themselves to be a better target for a buyout. It would be very, very interesting to see who's doing what and who's having what communications.
Well, oh my God. Yes, last year was Founders Paradise, $15 a share. Some of them down to $4 a share. It was Founders Paradise. And some of the companies that the founders absolutely benefited from the high share price. But you look at it now, the share prices are low. It's a great time for big pharma to buy cheap. And it's also a great time for investors to come in when the prices are really, really low. So
I agree with the really, really low and good time to buy, but I'm also going to say that I think there is a lot more deep diving that we need to take a look at into the market. And not that we're here to provide professional stock market advice, but I think, from a multidimensional aspect, we can dive deeper into this to see which ones are in a better place, stronger with their governing bodies to survive. Just because they're low, I mean, you buy a share at 80 cents, and if you lose all your shares, it's still not a good deal. So it's not a good time across the board.
But it is a good deal for big pharma to pump money into those particular companies that have the intellectual property.
Of course. But I'm just saying, like, from a retail investor, I wouldn't say it's a great time to buy unless you know very specifically who you're buying into and what their foundation is. And I also think, the soul architecture that's going to be up and coming on our show here is going to be really, really important to making some of those decisions as to who's the right time to buy in. So I agree with you that it's the right time.
Absolutely.
I just think it's very particular about who, and that's going to take a little bit more.
I totally agree with you, because what the soul architecture is going to allow us to do is look at some of the algorithms of these companies and the cycles and stuff that are conducive to growth, expansion, or contraction, depending on the astrology, as well as the numerology, as well as some of the other algorithms with the CEOs. And there's all kind of energetic things we can look at to make those determinations and to give our viewers kind of a little heads up as to how the companies are looking energetically, so they can make decisions.
Yeah. Well,
in addition to other market information.
Yes. Well, I can't wait to do the deeper dive and see what we find. All right. Well, stay tuned to our next episodes where we'll go deeper into many of the companies that are on the top of the list for investing and what the cards have to say about whether you should put your money in now with them or somewhere else. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. If you like what you hear, please give us a thumbs up below and hit the bell and be the first to receive updates. Visit our Patreon site, Psychedelic Sages, for more in-depth information.